see what he has to do. But in the end, I just want, I know Dennis isn't on right now, but just wanted to say to him, thank you for everything he's done over the years with the community, through Microsoft, through others, and whatnot. He has been a great person to while I don't work with Microsoft, I have worked with him, and just, it's great. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Dennis will definitely be missed. He was a knowledge powerhouse when it came to protocols and things of that nature. He's done some great work at Microsoft, and I'm excited to see what he accomplishes next. The presentation I'm going to do, you'll see, is branded. It's a presentation that I actually just recorded earlier this week for a Azure webinar series. So like I said, you'll see some of the branding. Ignore the branding. Let's just go for the presentation. So this presentation is how to SaaS-ify your apps with Azure Virtual Desktop. Let's see. Meet your speaker. Me, Thomas Willingham. I'm a program manager with the Azure Virtual Desktop Customer Acceleration Team, basically based in engineering, Microsoft engineering on the Azure Virtual Desktop team, but I'm customer facing. I work directly with a few strategic customers, guide them in their deployments, and then gather feedback to be driven back into the product. This discussion is about remote app streaming. So people are very familiar with using virtual desktops. Having a virtual desktop, they click on the resource, they get a full virtual desktop that is presented from another location. What people are less familiar with is the fact that remote desktop services, Azure Virtual Desktop, and I'll use Citrix VMware Virtual Desktop services also have the ability to just host applications. So you can click on the application itself and just be presented with the application. This can be very beneficial in you have a couple of apps that you need to use. Maybe the apps aren't even like compatible on the same system, but you need users to use these apps that wouldn't necessarily be compatible to be installed on the same system. You can use desktop virtualization to publish and enable users to have access to these applications. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to break users up into internal users versus external users. So internal users, these are going to be employers and contractors, or people who are working within the customer themselves. So they either work directly for the customer or they're a vendor working within the company. That's pretty straightforward. The licensing is pretty straightforward. We'll talk about licensing here in a minute, but again, the scenario is more straightforward. External users is a bit more tricky. By external employees, or external users, I mean non-employees. So imagine a partner of some kind that is hosting manufacturing applications to be used by customers for their manufacturing floor. Maybe it's a workflow system or a processing system or something of that nature. So they're providing the application to the end customer, but these end customers aren't direct employees of the provider. Again, they're a partner or an ISV that's publishing these applications for external users. Now, the scenario may make sense, but licensing gets a bit trickier. For licensing for internal users, like I said, it's relatively straightforward. We'll discuss licensing again here in a minute. But for external users, it becomes a little more muddled. And we'll talk about how Microsoft's recently announced solution, remote app streaming, enables external users to be able to access these applications and desktops also. So some benefits of streaming applications from Azure. This enables the ability to migrate your applications from on-premises into Azure. So now you get the benefits of having your applications in the cloud. You get scale, you get security, you get agility, you get the ability to scale up, scale down, and then you also get the ability to have users access these Windows applications from any device, anywhere. So whether the user is on a laptop, a phone, a tablet, a Mac, whatever, they can gain access to these Windows applications. And in fact, some customers are providing this type of service to enable Windows applications to be available on, say, Macs. They're heavily invested in these Windows applications, or they have Windows applications that are internal to their company, their line of business apps, and their Mac users can't use them. Enabling remote applications enables this scenario. Now, typically, to run and publish these applications, you have to set up an entire infrastructure. You have to set up a remote desktop services infrastructure of some kind. So you're going to have servers, web servers, licensing servers, brokers. You're going to have to configure the infrastructure. There's a lot to configure. And as you configure this, there's kind of three main stickler points for remote desktop services: cost, performance, and complexity. Traditionally, like I'm sure y'all have heard, every year since, God, what is it, Jeff? Since like 2012 has been the year of VDI. And every year,
something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And every year, customers are confronted with the fact that it's complex. To ensure decent performance can be expensive or hard to get. And if you don't have the thing deployed correctly, it's expensive. Publishing these remote apps using Azure Virtual Desktop kind of streamlines that. You no longer have to manage the infrastructure components of it. All you have to manage are the end clients and then the session hosts and the publishing applications. So it makes the environment much more straightforward. The ability to modernize your legacy applications. So your legacy Windows applications that are based on premises, you get to move those into the cloud. It enables more new business models. So now you have the opportunity to sell these applications to third-party environments. Expand globally, so you get to expand your reach, sell on marketplace, and also reduce support and validation costs by, again, being able to leverage the Azure Virtual Desktop environment and the Azure Virtual Desktop clients. So now you basically don't have to build the wheel from scratch. You can leverage all of these components. So licensing entitlements for using Azure Virtual Desktop. As I said, it's relatively straightforward, but Azure Virtual Desktop as a service isn't something that you have to pay for directly. It's an entitlement. So if you have, and this enumerates the licenses that you need to have. So if you have M365, E3, E5, F3, you have Windows 10 Enterprise E3, E5, or this education A3, A5. If you have any of these licenses, you are entitled to use Azure Virtual Desktop. There's no additional licensing fees for the environment. This includes Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 10, and Windows 11 multi-session. It says Windows 7. Oh, I know Windows 7 support is being phased out here somewhere in the relatively near future. I'm not quite sure when it is, though. So the ability to access all these different systems. And then notice there's an AKA MS AVD pricing if you want to dig deeper into pricing. Those are for the client systems. If you want to use server, Windows Server, use RDS on Windows Server, you additionally have to purchase server cows for that. So there's a little additional cost on that. But there I think you will find using either Windows 10, Windows 11, or 10 or 11 multi-session should do pretty well for you. So per user access pricing for external users. Now, if you have these external users that you're trying to provide these services for, you obviously don't want to have to purchase these full-blown licenses for them. You don't want to have to purchase M365, E3, E5, or some of those, because that could get pretty pricey depending on how many users or how many customers that you have. So what they've done is they've provided a licensing model here to enable this per user access pricing. It's $5.50 per user per month for applications and $10 per user per month for apps and desktops. And again, this is pretty straightforward licensing. So now any customers that you want to enable, if they use the environment, they're just going to be charged that amount. Now, there's some additional costs that we'll talk about here in just a minute, but that's the licensing associated cost. So now to break this down for internal users, it's an entitlement. You just need the appropriate licensing, and then those users are entitled to use Azure Virtual Desktop and then access remote applications. For external users, you need to use this per user access pricing, and then once this is enabled, you'll be billed appropriately per customer, and customers will be able to access this. To think about is, what does it mean to include an application? One thing that's important for these remote applications that are distributed to external users is the application has to be software that provides additional value. So as a provider, you can't just give a Windows 10 basic desktop, Windows 11 basic desktop. You can't do that. You need to add value. So you could stream a first-party app. So your provider, you're providing that manufacturing app that you own. Obviously, you would need to the customer would need to take care of licensing with you. So you would need to manage that on your end. But you're providing that first-party application to external users. Let's say as a software provider, this remote app streaming, you're providing this software to end customers. Let's say as a provider, you partner with another company and they say, hey, I want to add our software to enable users in the environment. So you could do third-party apps to external users. You can also stream these first-party and third-party apps plus a desktop to the external user. So for external users, you can provide first-party app, third-party app, just as a remote app, or first or third-party app plus a desktop. Those are all valid supported use cases. If you're just going to stream a Windows desktop to external users with no additional value, so you haven't done anything to the desktop, that is not considered a supported scenario. That's considered resale. So Azure Virtual Desktop. Remote app is built on top of Azure Virtual Desktop. Azure Virtual Desktop is kind of the underlying foundational system for this remote app streaming. So now let's talk about the additional costs. So we've talked about licensing costs. For internal users, it's an entitlement once you have the appropriate licensing. For external users, you have to configure per user access licensing and you're billed appropriately. But there's also infrastructure costs associated with this. Notice there's no additional charge for users with eligible Windows licenses. And the monthly fee is paid, the per user access licensing. But on top of that, the infrastructure costs need to be taken care of. The cost of the compute resources, the virtual machine, storage, networking, user profile disks. So this will all be additional billing associated with it. So you'll need to ensure that the pricing you're setting for your customers takes all this into account. And then the per user cost, again, is the licensing cost. And then additionally, your infrastructure costs. And then there's, again, more information on AKA .ms, that should be a dot, not a slash, AVD pricing. So let's review how straightforward it is to enable or activate per user access licensing. And this per user access licensing, this is how you enable remote app streaming for end users. Now, I was going to show this live, but due to the fact that it takes a bit for it to enable, I'm just going to show some screenshots, and then I'll flip over to my subscription really quick and then show you here's what it looks like when you're enrolled. It's pretty straightforward. So activating per user access licensing. Here, let me get where's my pointer? Laser pointer. So you see here, I'm in the Azure Virtual Desktop Blade. Overview, and then under licensing, there's a per user access pricing blade here. So I'm on the overview, I click per user access licensing, and I'm taken to that blade. So now I'm shown the subscriptions that are available to me to enroll in per user access licensing. I can select one, select enroll. It's all pretty straightforward. Now, at this time, one thing to think about is per user access pricing does not discriminate between entitled users versus users who are enabled through per user access pricing. Let me explain that a bit more. So let's say you have an existing Azure Virtual Desktop deployment for your internal users. And we know that for internal users, we just use our entitlements, our existing M365 licensing or whatever that looks like, that entitles those users. So I have those users, they're all working. Let's say there's 3,000 of them. Now, I want to enable per user access pricing because I have some customers I want to provide resources for. I want to provide and publish applications for. So I come into my subscription, I click it, I enroll, and let's say I have 1,000 external users that I'm providing services for. Now, in the current iteration, per user access licensing evaluates everyone in the subscription that is using Azure Virtual Desktop resources and bills them per user access pricing. What does that mean? Well, in the example I just gave, I have 3,000 internal users that are already entitled to use it. I have 1,000 external users that I want to have per user access pricing associated with. But currently, you will be billed per user access pricing for 4,000 users. All users in the subscription will be billed. Now that's now. There is features down the road that they're looking at on the roadmap to basically evaluate if a user is already entitled to use Azure Virtual Desktop, and then if they are, don't bill them. But currently, the best guidance to enable this is to create a separate subscription for your customers and then enroll or enable per user access pricing for that separate subscription. Okay, so once I click a subscription and I click the enroll button, basically gives you a little bit of information and says, hey, this allows you to provide AVD services to external customers. To serve internal customers, you need eligible Windows Microsoft Service licenses instead, the entitlement, and then you click enroll. Then you get the notification that, hey, enrollment has started. This may take a little bit. The first time I did this, I think it took like 20 plus minutes or something like that. So it's not hours or anything of that nature, but it's not instantaneous either. So expect a little bit of time to pass. And then finally, when it's finished, you'll see, well, in process, you'll see enrolling, like you see here. And then when it's finally finished, you'll see enrolled. And that lets you know, hey, per user access pricing is now available for this environment. And then you see here, boom, it's enrolled. And then here it talks about deployment recommendations, how to deploy. Again, this is based on Azure Virtual Desktop. And while you deploy Azure Virtual Desktop the same way, there are things that you need to take into account to enable access to external identities. We'll talk about that in a bit. So really quick, let me drop out of here. Let's drop out. Oh, we can be on this page. And we'll go to... So here's the Azure Virtual Desktop Blade. I'm on the overview page. I go to per user access licensing. And you see right here, I have a subscription and it's currently enrolled. And I'm going to flip off that because it has my subscription number associated with that. But you see, hey, there is the per user access licensing and it is enrolled. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's go back to... Okay, so architecting a deployment for external users. What do you need to think about in this type of environment? And like I said, the environment is typically the same here. You need a workspace, you need host pools, you need session hosts, and you need application groups. So that's all the same at this point. The one thing to note is at this time, Azure Virtual Desktop does not support external identity providers, so more commonly referred to as B2B. B2B AVD does not currently have B2B support. So what ISVs need to do at this point is work around this by creating and managing these identities for external users. So to provide the most secure solution, it's recommended, and I mentioned this earlier, to create a separate tenant, Azure AD tenant per customer enterprise. And I would even go so far as not only a separate Azure AD tenant, but a separate subscription. And I'll talk about why that's important here in a bit. And then there are some remote app streaming architecture recommendations here in this here. If really quick, and just show you in the AVD remote app streaming, there's a lot of really good resources here associated. Where's the architecture guide? Anyway, the architecture guide is, maybe it's in reference or resources. So you see, there's a lot of information here about how to deploy the offering, how to manage the offering, and so there's a lot of good information here. So let me go back to presentation. Zoop, zoop, zoop. Slide. And then now so I've talked about the Azure Virtual Desktop deployment. Let's go ahead and talk about what an Azure Virtual Desktop deployment looks like from the portal. We go back to the portal, zoop. This go. So workspace. Your workspace is your environment that It's kind of your all-up container. It hosts the application groups that get associated to session hosts. Your host pools, these are the resources that are available to your end users. So I have a host pool here. Here's my total machines. All are available, my total sessions, my disconnected sessions, and my application groups. I have 2 separate application groups. One application group are my assignments to my desktops, and one application group is my assignment to my published remote applications. Then if we look here, here's my session hosts. They're both available, and I have some information in my session hosts. So now if I look at my application groups, I see here's my desktop group, my desktop application group, and then here's my group for my applications. If I look here, I have 5 applications. I have Visual Studio, Word, and this is where you could publish any line of business app that your company wants to provide for users. And then once that's created, you create your assignments. And then these are users. I have a group assigned here. These are users that are enabled to use these applications here. So you see, it's pretty straightforward getting that environment done.
Thomas, there was a question in the chat.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thanks, Jen. What is it? If you don't mind.
Yeah. Could we get an example of a company using a per user access license, like how it's used?
Well, like I said, at this point, I'm hesitant to name. We don't have any published case studies yet. So oh wait, I take that back. We do have a published case study. Sage is a partner of ours that is providing external customers applications. The customers that I'm working with at this point are more looking for like manufacturing, having applications for a manufacturing environment. So this company has created some workflows for the manufacturing floor and then provides the remote applications to manufacturers, or possibly like subcontractors that aren't part of the company but provide parts for the company. So they use those workflows. Like a scenario would be manufacturing floor that has zones associated with it, and each zone has specific actions that need to be performed. So there's a workflow model. As users input information that basically check off a specific action has been performed, it goes to the next person. And then once that zone, all the actions are performed in that zone, then it gets moved to the next zone. Does that answer the question?
I'll let you know if I see a reply. Oh, yes.
Okay,
Oh,
perfect.
there was a follow-up. How about resale?
How about resale? So resale without value add is not considered a viable scenario at this time. If you wanted to resale with some applications that add value, that just goes back to you can't just provide a Windows 10 or Windows 11 desktop. You need to have a special application or special widget that's providing additional value of some kind. Good.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions so far? I mean, now's as good a time as any to take a quick break and field any more questions that people may have. If you've been holding back.
No, that was it. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So now let's talk about the Azure Virtual Desktop environment itself. What's included in Azure Virtual Desktop? Well, as I said, one of the benefits of using Azure Virtual Desktop is the optimization of deployment. So the RDS landing page, Azure security, virtual desktops, the RDS as a service, that's all built in. So all the partner really needs to manage are the end users and the session hosts themselves. The infrastructure or the glue is all taken care of. And then from a customer infrastructure standpoint, all they need to manage is the compute virtual machine. So basically Azure resources, any databases, any storage, any networking, that will all need to be addressed. So this kind of outlines what a deployment might look like. You see we have Active Directory and then synced to Azure AD domain services, and we also need Active Directory. Now, in this example, there's one partner subscription, and then each customer has their own Azure Virtual Desktop environment. They have their own workspace, their own host pool, their own application groups. So due to this, this will ensure isolation between the customers. Customer 2 will be unable to access customer 1's resources. Customer 1 will be unable to access customer 2's resources. Now, I would actually take this a step further for managing cost purposes. I would create separate subscriptions per customer. And while that may lead to some additional overhead for managing the users, it will optimize cost management, because now everything in a single subscription is associated to customer 1. Everything in the next subscription is associated to customer 2. And like I said, it just kind of optimizes cost reporting and cost management for these environments. And then finally, so we've talked about how to enroll, how to enable per user access pricing, and you saw it was very straightforward. It was multiple clicks. The second thing we talked about was that we demoed was the Azure Virtual Desktop environment. What's that look like? We talked about workspaces, host pools, session hosts, and app groups. And that's all pretty straightforward. Now let's talk about user experience. What does the user see? How does this work? So if we come to our users here, so this is a Windows or Azure Virtual Desktop client, and you see I have multiple workspaces here for multiple different email accounts. The one I'll use right here is this test user 1. I have Visual Studio, Word. These are pretty straightforward, but these applications being published could just as easily be a line of business application, a manufacturing application, whatever Windows application it is that you want to publish. So let's go ahead and open Visual Studio here. This shows me, if I click Show Details, all that does is show me the window of the VM being spun up, if it's not spun up already, and what that looks like. So, okay, here's Visual Studio. Boom. Let's go into a script here. And you see I'm accessing Visual Studio as if it were local. The end user has no idea that this could be a remote application. And let's do Word here. Okay, so now I'm in Word, I'm in Visual Studio, I'm managing, let's say for whatever reason, I need to document this script that's been written. So let's copy that out. Let's paste that in here. I can start script. Notice I was able to copy and paste in between the applications seamlessly. To the end user, these are just more applications I'm running on my desktop. The only even visual indication that these aren't local are these Azure Virtual Desktop icons associated with the icon itself. That's the only way that the end user would know that these aren't local applications. Now, one thing to think about is the fact that running a remote application can actually be more performant than running the application on your local desktop. And you may think to yourself, Thomas, how can that be true? Well, let me explain it to you. Let's say that I'm running a virtual desktop from US East. And I'm running that desktop, and I'm running an application that has a backend that's in Azure. Now, my desktop is in Azure. My application is in Azure. So the application is accessing that data at Azure backplane speeds. And then for the end user, all that's being sent down is the screenshot that the user interacts with. That's how accessing application in the cloud can actually be more performant than accessing an application locally. So you see, like I said, I can access this. I can use it as if it were local. But let's get out. Let me show you one other thing here. Okay, let's exit out of here. Don't save. Let's go back into the web and in here. So now I've shown you the Windows client. Let's take a look at what it looks like for the HTML client. Wow. Prompted for my credentials. Now again, I'm accessing the same information in the same way. I'm just using a little different client. I'm just using a web browser as a client. So now let's see if I F11 show you there's no magic here. Look, I'm in a browser and I'm accessing an application again as if it were local. Boom. Now I can flip in between my applications. So this just shows that there's a broad reach of clients that are available to your end customer. You know, whether they're Windows-based devices, Mac devices, iOS, Linux, whatever, there's a client that enables customers to access these applications. Back here. So that's the demo for using remote apps. Let's see, what do we have now? Okay, now we have some really good, the last couple slides are just some resources, and then, hey, thanks for attending, peace out. This is a really good screen to take a look at to see, hey, here's all the resources that are available. There's some partner resources, some migration resources, how to modernize and how to maximize revenue. But the next one are kind of your, hey, let's get started. Getting started, AVD gets started. So that's starting with Azure Virtual Desktop, how you get that deployed. The AVD remote app streaming for getting remote app streaming deployed, simulating the end user experience. This is good because this will give you an idea of what your round trip times are. So if I'm based on the US or if I'm based on the West Coast and I'm deploying in, let's say the Midwest, Central, or US East or something of that nature, what's my experience? And you can start evaluating like what your round trip times are. You can do pricing. And then finally, there are specialists that you can work with to enable this to go further, to help you get this deployed in your environment. And that kind of wraps up the discussion here at this point.
There is a question, Thomas.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, if a user is accessing remote app Microsoft Word, how does it work with the FS Logic's profile?
FS Logic profile, so that would need to be set up separately. And what that enables is for that user to actually save content. to save content in their own profile or their own area. And then that would also need to be set up with FS Logic user profiles. Does that make sense?
So this is Arif. I'm the one who asked questions. So remote apps, my actually question was is like if I'm accessing Microsoft Word and I already set up my FS Logic profile with the file Azure Share path to it. So when accessing Word or any application remote app, how does it works? Does it work as the same way? Well, you accessing a session host, or is it differently?
No, it's the same way. It's just it's wrapped differently. So instead of having to navigate the virtual desktop to gain access to data and resources, all you have to do is navigate the application itself.
Okay. So
Does that
if
make
I go
sense?
to so if I go to see users path in there in the session host where the user logs in. So for example, Microsoft Word, I will see the same FS Logic profiles, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay,
So
okay.
notice when I went to close. So let's see if I still have that in my buffer. Come on. Everything's been running so smoothly. Okay, so let's do this again. We'll come back here, say new. This. So notice when I said close, it's prompting me. This is my OneDrive in my user profile drive.
Okay.
And I could set that in my documents, and so it'll work the same.
So were you logged in before in a OneDrive, or for example, for the new users, if we give a remote app like Word or something, and it's doing same thing as a file save as, and what the use, I'm trying to differentiate between this logging as an session host or the remote app. And actually remote apps works much better as a performance wise. So, but the differences would be is like, how can users save into a OneDrive? Does user has to log in a OneDrive also, or how does it will work?
So to be honest, OneDrive, the OneDrive scenario isn't fully supported. So in this environment, if you have desktops published also that OneDrive is associated into, you'll need to, from the remote app, associate this into your documents directory and then let the documents directory and the virtual desktop on the back end sync it up to OneDrive. Trying to access or navigate OneDrive directly from your remote app has inconsistent experience.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Can you please show the first slide with resources? Thank you.
Oh, of course, of course. This one or this one? Oh, wait. Or this one?
It's this one. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, get a screenshot of this one. Perfect. Any other questions or?
Do you have any recommendation for how to set up for OneDrive? Just out of a question on this one, just regular.
So
Because
in
sorry.
a virtual desktop environment where you're doing virtual desktops, it's straightforward. And in fact, there's guidance up on
And will it go with SSO so they don't have to relog back again? You know what I mean? When they log
yes,
into a
yeah,
session host.
yeah, that yeah. So let's see. On here. Jen, do you know where the OneDrive documentation is? Is it in AVD or is it on OneDrive?
It's a little bit of both, but there is one there. If you just type OneDrive in the filter title, you should. Yeah. All right, somebody just posted it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
Thanks,
have
perfect.
Dennis.
Thank you.
posted.
It takes a
might be
village.
helpful. Yeah, it might be helpful.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and stop presenting.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Next up, we have the folks from EG.
Hey, Jen. Hey, team. How are you guys?
Doing well, thank you.
Excellent. All right. Let me make myself presenter and I will tell you guys what we do in the performance management space for Azure Virtual Desktops. Okay. And how we proactively monitor it and how do we help our customers to understand very quick what's going on in the Azure Virtual Desktops. So I'm going to do that. All right. Just give me a minute. I will be presenting, you know, the details on the screen. So. All right. Perfect. I'm done here. Let me just quickly check if you guys can see my screen.
Not yet.
How about
There
now?
we go. Perfect.
All right, excellent. Hey, thank you so much, Jen, rest of the team there for giving us this opportunity, and we really appreciate it from EG. All right, I just have a few slides here to quickly walk through what we do and how we do, so you guys understand the architecture and you guys understand how we can monitor those Azure virtual desktops. And key here is the proactive monitoring, what we are talking about. And we also don't look at just AVDs. We also see how AVDs are delivered to the customers, right, from an end user perspective, how they are accessing it and what is going on in the AVD space. And essentially there are a lot of things we know. This is to just quickly give you a quick, let's say, a refresh on the architecture, right? So we do have a control plane there. You can see things in the control plane: load balancing, licensing, web access, and brokering, and also the the Azure subscription and the multi-session host. So these are things in the architecture we know. Now, what are the key challenges when it comes to AVD from a monitoring perspective? If we have customers who are actually using our solution to monitor the AVDs, mortgage companies and healthcare customers. Uh, the reason is because when a user calls in compliance, it's slow. What is slow? What is really causing it? And what makes it more complex is because it's also cloud SaaS. So, a lot of things is not in our control to understand how they are performing. So the ability to go deep into this space and provide them the visibility into how the virtual desktops performing, the Azure virtual desktops are performing, and what are the supporting components and how they are performing in a one comprehensive view. That's really very useful for our customers. So obviously we know the IT teams don't have a full control of the AVD platform, and also the distributed nature of the AVD environment. It makes performance management more challenging. Like I said, when I use the compliance, it's a slow desktop experience. What is the root cause there? Is it something to do with the end user terminal where they're connecting from? Is it slow? Is network is having an issue, or something going on with the bandwidth, or ISP is slow? So we need to understand all these different aspects of the AVD delivery and how the user experience is. That's what I'm going to cover today in this webinar. I'm not really going to go over this slide, but obviously there are a lot of question comes up when it comes to an ABD issue. So how do you answer it, right? That's critical, where the slowness is, where the problems are. So we are trying to cover as much as, I'm going to cover as much as we can in this session today, but keep it very simple and straightforward. Just think of it 4 areas, right? So when it comes to Azure Virtual Desktops monitoring, first of all, what most of our customers are interested in seeing how the Azure virtual desktops are performing is with the user experience. If users are happy, things are good, then it's a great experience, right? You don't need to really spend too much time and effort to understand what's going on there. As long as the users are happy and the experience to access their desktops are very good, that's great. So monitoring the user experience. And when it comes to Azure virtual desktops, we are not talking about a bunch of desktops monitoring. We're actually talking about ecosystem, which is delivering these, Azure virtual desktops. So monitoring every layer and every tier of that architecture is key, and pinpointing where the root cause, that's another area to focus, because it could be a problem happening somewhere in the control plane. You may not be, responsible for that, but the users are experiencing slowness. So pinpointing where the problem is key, so you understand where to start, troubleshooting, right? And then right sizing and optimizing reports. Now, the first point we want to address is quick about the user experience. There are 2 different ways we can handle this user experience in the Azure Virtual Desktops. Our solution is not just focused for Azure Virtual Desktops. It's called EG Enterprise Monitoring Solution. And I'm going to go through a live demo with you guys. Just a couple of more slides, and then I will get right into the solution. We monitor more than 200 plus technologies, and Azure Virtual Desktops is one of the technology, and our focus is giving a comprehensive view and end-to-end visibility. That's our focus. So when it comes to user experience, giving you a full session visibility. The users might click on 10 different things and access the Azure Virtual Desktops. To see end-to-end here, we can also use our screen scraping technology, record and playback everything, and bring you the user experience, how much time it is taking to respond, and are those transactions are available. So that's synthetic monitoring. And real user experience monitoring is nothing but essentially giving you each and every user who's connecting to this Azure Virtual Desktops, how their performance is, and what applications they are accessing. How things are there within their access. So pointing out all this is real user monitoring. So the synthetic monitoring we are talking about, this is a good scenario where you don't have to have a real user to test and see how the performance is. Very oftentimes what we hear is, hey, we are seeing reactive alerts rather proactive alerts, because after the users are experiencing problems, we are getting calls from them, emails from them complaining things are slow. Now just take a step back and think, okay, even before the users going through this hassle and figuring out that a lot of things are slowing down, what if we can provide you a test user? With that test user, you can see a simulation going through this AVD access like a real user, and helping you to see how things are working. So if you notice here on the screen, this is mimicking how a user is going to connect to the AVD, Azure Virtual Desktops, and launch a desktop. So it's basically giving you that visibility here. And what you're seeing in this picture is a simulation. Every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however you want to run this simulation, you can configure it. But the key here is, without your real users complaining about a problem, proactively this Azure Virtual Logon Simulation, desktop logon simulation, will provide you the details of where things are slowing down when a user is trying to launch a desktop. So you can keep an eye on it. Think of it like this: you have an application running on that Azure Virtual Desktop, and you're going to perform an update on that application. So you want to see what is going to happen before and after update from logon perspective. You can use this logon simulation to proactively monitor and give you the details where it is going to slow down the things. Okay, so this is a good feature, and this is part of our user experience monitoring. Keep it in mind, this is one way of monitoring the user experience. We also monitor the real users who are connecting to the virtual Azure virtual desktop, so we are going to provide you that details as well. Okay, with that said, this is a topology what we are seeing it on the screen, and I'm going to go right into the demonstration, our solution, to show you guys. Okay, it is really very simple. We use standard color coding. Red is critical, orange is major, yellow ones are the proactive ones. And obviously you can see we are also, improving our solution, enhancing a lot of our monitoring. So we are also looking at control plane, and we can give you guys additional metrics in the control plane like load balancers, web access, even brokering. So the point here is when you see something in red, that's critical. Orange, major. Yellow, that's the proactive ones. Now we can monitor all these critical components involved in the Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop environment, like subscription, Azure Active Directory Connect, host pool, AVD broker, Azure Virtual Desktop's broker. Why broker is important? Because that's key. If you see any performance issues there, then your virtual desktop brokering will have an issue. So knowing the performance of Azure Virtual Desktop Broker ahead of time is really a good thing. Now, I am not going to go through each and every one of these critical supporting infrastructure component for Azure Virtual Desktop one by one in a silo-based way. That's not what we do. What we do is we monitor all this in a service view. We call that as a segment. So it's a AVD infrastructure segment, as you can see it on the screen, and it's having a major issue. So clicking on that will give you the ability to see how this Azure Virtual Desktop environment is tied together and how it is delivering the desktops to the end user. Now, you might have teams like help desk or um, trouble ticketing team, where they are curious about not just the whole performance of the AVD environment. Instead, their focus is mostly on the user experience, how things are going on with the user experience. So we also support out of the box dashboards here for user experience and for a session host and all that. Think of it this way. There is a dashboard for user experience which can tell you right away what is the round trip time, which is key. So if your round trip time, in this case it's a Microsoft um, FX protocol, right? So if your round trip time is high and it's causing a slowness there, you need to be aware of it. So it gives you the round trip time, it gives you the bandwidth usage, and then the resource usage for this user session. So overall, if you notice that we have a couple of users and both user sessions are really good. We're not seeing any, input delays from the user end. Application launch is pretty good. It's about like 2 seconds there. Round trip time, like I said, 0.2 seconds. Bandwidth usage is 111 kilobytes per second. So these are really good numbers there, and that's why everything is green in color. Now, let's say for some reason, if things are not working and something is going on here, you will see different color coding. Okay. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go right from this user experience dashboard to the host pool. Okay. And how this is going to help us, because you can see more detailed information about what is going on. So this particular user session here, what is going on with the operating system level? What is the user experience we are noticing for this user? Yeah. These are the important metrics. And when we say monitoring, we're not just talking about up or down status. What we are talking about is how the user experiences in terms of when they access the Azure Virtual Desktops, bandwidth usage, TCP round trip time, UDP values, and then the network. Now, we can also look at the performance of that user session, how much CPU, how much. Now, what is really key here is, if you notice here, this user session has got like about 10% less than 10% of memory usage. It's not a problem, but at the same time, you will have a complete visibility of what is going on in that Azure Virtual Desktop, which process, which application is taking up that resource. The granularity with which your troubleshooting process will be made very simple and straightforward. That's what I'm talking about. Instead of getting a notification in a proactive way saying, hey, there is high memory usage on this Azure Virtual Desktop, the EG alert will also include what application is causing it. So troubleshooting makes it easy. Okay. All right, I'm going to just take a second year. Any questions so far, team?
No, I have a quick question if you don't mind.
Please, please.
Is there any alerting process that highlights, say, if a user's round trip time goes above a specific threshold, indicating that they're going to have a bad experience, or is there any kind of alerting of that nature?
Absolutely, yes. This is our demonstration system, so we didn't, set it up, but the thresholds are industry standard thresholds. And let me show you. That's a great question. So you see this TCP right here, and you click on this info tab, the icon. Okay. So there's a threshold set for average frames, frame quality, and all that. But your question is a valid one. So right here, the current TCP round trip time. We have industry standard recommendation. So usually on the Citrix side, what we see is 3 seconds is what Citrix says. It's even not a really good number, but again, Citrix says, hey, anything goes about 3 seconds, we should notify that as a critical alert, because that's a lot of latency on the Citrix side. So you can set up a threshold here saying, hey, if anything goes about 1 second, okay, I need a proactive alert. Anything goes about 2 seconds, yes, please send me a major alert. You understand what I'm saying? And the policy governs when to alert. In this scenario, we will not have it as a long term. It's an immediate policy. So the moment the round trip time is more than 1 second, the solution will automatically trigger an alert, proactive alert.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, as you can see, the moment I set up the threshold, it's right now available. So going forward, if the measure is really higher than this number, automatically the system will trigger an alert and the administrator can fix the problem quick. All right, any other questions before I jump right back into the demo? All right, I'll take that as a no. So if you guys notice here, like I explained earlier, user experience is key. We cover all that user experience metrics. As a matter of fact, hey, if a user on the Azure Virtual Desktop accessing, browsers like Microsoft Edge, Chrome, things like that, and if they are really taking up a lot of resource because of Chrome or because of another browser, and they're accessing resource intensive websites, you can actually see what websites they are accessing in their session and how much resource it's taking up. This will really help you to keep an eye on the applications they are accessing and which ones are resource intensive during their access. And here comes the session level information, the disconnected state of the session, and how many sessions are in idle or active state, application or events. As a matter of fact, we are capturing all the applications on the AVD, so you can see their performance, how much resource it's taking up, all the good stuff you want to cover. IOPS, and then the handle count data. So this will give you a clear visibility of where the performance bottleneck is coming up, the Azure Virtual Desktop. Remember, like I said earlier, we're not shy. What we are collecting is very in-depth metrics out of these Azure Virtual Desktops environment, so you guys can focus on how to fix the problem quick and keep things running smooth. Okay. All right, from an architecture perspective, I do see that some interesting questions are coming up. Let me just take it parallel. So from architecture perspective, okay, architecture perspective, we have management console. So basically, this is centralized software. You can run it in cloud or on-prem. It doesn't matter. And we have a. I'm not sure if the question is for me or from Janice. So target market, or we have customers in all domains: financial, healthcare, government. So State Department, Department of Justice. So there are a lot of customers in different domains we support. For Azure Virtual Desktops, like I said earlier, we have customers where we are running a few thousands of Azure Virtual Desktops in their environment, monitoring the performance, helping them to see how things are working there. So I'll be very happy to share more details. But given the fact the time, I'm going to run through this demonstration and explain to you guys what are the other features we offer from Azure Virtual Desktops monitoring. So the desktops monitoring, if you notice here, okay, we also provide dashboards and reports out of the box. So these are the different session hosts, and these are the different host pool they are in, and the number of active sessions. So we have just 2 users connected right now, and you can also click on these session hosts, and you can see how the session host is performing. So if processes are not running, you're seeing that, hey, these are supposed to be the process running on this session host. It's not running, so it triggers an alert right away. So the way architecture works, the management console is key, and then we will have a client piece of software installed on the session host, which will monitor all these different user experience and the host pool monitoring. Now, one thing I wanted to clearly make sure you understand, we are not going to manage each and every session host. The way it is going to work is we will have discovery through which your host pools are going to get discovered automatically. And once we have those pools discovered, host pools are discovered, then it will also discover the session and all the additional information. So right there, if you notice it, these are the different host pools. So it will all be done automatically. Makes it easier in terms of configuration. Now we have reports and dashboards to support all this feature. So if you notice here, we have dedicated dashboards for AVD. So where you can see how the infrastructure is performing, how the session hosts are performing, and also how the users are performing. So we have this, let me just make sure. We have these dashboards built in, and we have a dedicated reporter for Azure Virtual Desktops. So you can also see that, a part of the monitoring. Okay, with that said, it's 10:30, so I'm going to conclude this session. Any question?
There is a couple of questions in the chat. I think you covered Janice's question. There's also one, can we get historical data like the last 3 months?
Yeah, definitely, Jen. Yep. So Jamie, we can, there's no restriction on the data retention. You can go as back as 13 months of data in the solution. So we don't have any restriction. We'll give you the right sizing on the database side. So you can have as much as data you want in the database side.
How about agent? So assuming that you have an agent installed on the session host, or do you tie into log analytics? How is this data being pulled?
No, we don't want to be another dependent solution. So for an instance, if things are not going that great with log analytics, for some reason, it's all software, right? If it's slowing down, we don't want to get impacted. So the way we do things is we have this client piece of software which goes into the session host, and it discovers all your host pool. And then you can pick and choose which host pool you want to monitor, essentially. And this agent we are talking about, it's a lightweight agent. I can share the footprint information with you guys. From a CPU CPU perspective, it takes anywhere between 0.1 to 1% of CPU memory. It's about like 150 megabytes of memory. Network bandwidth is about 0.2 kilobytes per second. So essentially, we are talking a very lightweight and the session node doesn't require any reboot when we install the software. So the client software will collect this information and use the push technology to send the data to the management console. That's how it works.
Is that TCP traffic like on 443?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yes, it supports multi-cloud monitoring as well. It's not just Microsoft Azure. We can support AWS. We also have support for other components. So yes.
Excellent. This is great. Thank you so much for joining and sharing this with us. How do we get, if we wanted to try this out, is there a trial that we can go to the website, check out, or do you have a link for us?
Absolutely. We have a trial, and go to our website, which will be easier. It's www.eginnovations.com. Let me also see if I can find a link, and I will share that, Jen. In the
Okay,
Teams
that'll be
chat.
great. All
Sure.
right. Thanks so much. All right.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time, and thanks for listening.